Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday night Creator Convos. I'm Noelle Marshall, and I'm so happy you all have decided to join us tonight. And those of you who will join us on Facebook and later pick it up because you're one of our wonderful subscribers, we welcome you. And tonight, Bob is going to be your super host, and he is going to introduce our friend Trebbe Johnson. And Trebbe has a wonderful book, so needed this time on the planet, and has a lot of suggestions on how to get through it. And so anyway, we ask you just to relax, listen, keep your video off, mute yourself, put your comments and questions in the chat, and that they will be answered in time. And let's see, am I forgetting anything, Bob?
No, that's good. Let's learn about co-creators convergence and then get on with the fun.
Okay, so stand by and we'll tell you a little bit about the co-creators convergence and what's coming up. Here we go.
And thank you, Trebbe, for being our conversationalist. Every Thursday night, we gather around the Co-Creators Convergence campfire. We know that Barbara Marks Hubbard is sitting right over our shoulder, warming her hands to the fire as well, and invite folks to share their gift to the shift in humanity. All of us have gifts. All of us, the world deserves for us to share our gifts with others. And so we are so delighted to have Trebbe with us this evening. I want to tell you a little bit about Trebbe and also about what she's going to talk about this evening. And I'm particularly looking forward to our conversation with all of you that are in the Zoom room and bringing over any comments or questions that Noelle will lift off of the Facebook chat, because we're in many Facebook rooms at this time as well. Trebbe is the author of 5 books now, the most recent being Fierce Consciousness, Surviving the Sorrows of Earth and Self. She just recently, last week, finished a 24 city tour with her book, which was an amazing opportunity for her to see our beautiful country and meet with people and talk to them about fierce consciousness, which is what we need right now. She is the author of many articles and essays that explore the human bond with nature and how to cope in challenging times. In fact, one of her most popular books is Radical Joy of Heart for Hard Times, Finding the Meaning and Making Beauty in Earth's Broken Places. And we definitely want to talk about that this evening. Because when hard times overwhelm us, the struggle to cope can feel like it's crushing us even more. And yet it's possible to not only survive, but through these challenging times in our lives and in our communities and in our ailing planet, but also to face them in ways that give meaning to our life and provide constant access to beauty, because it is everywhere. So coping with those challenges of environmental, social, and personal issues can lead one, we really need something well beyond what we would call self-help or self-help books and look at the bigger picture and be fierce in our consciousness. So Trebbe's new book actually addresses 35 practices that are simple, sassy, and surprising that anyone can use to lift themselves up. Trebbe also created a, excuse me, as the founder and director of a global community that's called Radical Joy. Noelle will put the URL to that website in the chat. Radical Joy for Hard Times, which is devoted to finding and making beauty in wounded places. She has been really a lifelong adventurer in both inner and outer worlds. She speaks 4 languages, has camped alone in the Arctic. Maybe we'll ask a question about that. Worked as an artist model and a street sweeper in England, and has been an award-winning multimedia producer. And Noelle and I had joy come into our life by meeting Trebbe in February of 2020, when the 3 of us were part of a 100-person peacemaking delegation to the Middle East. It was just an amazing time for us to get to know each other and bring our light and our joy there. So with that, I'm going to turn the talking stick over to you and have you share what you will with us, and then we'll go into conversation. And if you'd be so kind as to center us with a centering opportunity to get started, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Noelle. Thank you for having me here. It is wonderful to see you both again. So for the centering, I would just invite everybody right now to just settle in to the whole sort of energy of what this day has been. Not necessarily thinking about anything in particular, but just feeling the flow of events during this day. Just all the various things that touched you and that you touched. And perhaps there was one aspect of the day that felt challenging or difficult. You might touch on that a bit. Just lightly touch it. And then there would be another part of the day where you felt engaged with life, happy, loving, inspired, something like that, a high point. So just touch in with that. And know that all of these energies and emotions are constantly flowing in and out of us. And they're all valid at any given time. We are complex, amazing beings, capable of so much on the inside and the outside. So this is just an invitation to accept right now who you are and where you are. And we will join this evening together as we begin. I just wrote this book called Fierce Consciousness, and I'm going to read you a little bit from that. Just maybe I'll read a little bit now, a little bit later. But what I decided to do, I decided to publish this myself and go on a 5-week book tour all across the country. I drove a total of 9,800 miles, and I stopped in, I think, 24, 25, 26 places. And friends all the way along organized these events for me. And some were in environmental centers, a library, bookstores, private homes. And it was so wonderful. And I just had a marvelous time. I got back and people said, "Oh, you must be exhausted." But I wasn't exhausted. I just had a terrific time having reunions with people that I love, talking about my work and driving across this incredibly beautiful country. And at one event in Boise, Idaho, my friend Tom was introducing me to a group, the group who had gathered at a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And he pointed out that my 3 main books all have this kind of theme of looking at something that's large or challenging and then diving into it and saying, all right, what's the juice here? What's the beauty? What's the meaning? How do I thrive under this circumstance? And I had never thought of that before. It was kind of like news to me. But I realized that it really was true. And I seem to have been born, well, maybe not born, but it's been a huge part of my life to have this kind of perspective. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But I wanted to read you just a couple of paragraphs from from Fierce Consciousness. This is what it looks like, Fierce Consciousness. And it's from the prologue. And it kind of sets the tone for the whole thing. The United States was in the 6th month of the coronavirus pandemic when my husband died. Andy had had bladder cancer for about 7 years, but as far as his doctor had assured us just 3 months before, it was manageable, non-invasive, and non-aggressive. In July, his health started to decline. He lost his appetite and tired easily. On August 4th, I took him to the hospital emergency room. For 3 days, the doctors hid their knowledge behind their professional gazes, reporting that they needed the pathology before they could tell us anything. Finally, a palliative care doctor let us know that the cancer had spread to his liver and stomach, and he didn't have much time left. And he died in a hospice facility 5 days later. So, the worst thing in my life had happened, the thing I had been dreading, the thing I had tried to prepare myself for ever since I fell in love with that creative, sexy, sweet, and brilliant man. I was alone. An hour after he died, after I had called his 3 grown children and a few friends and packed up all our things, I walked out of the hospice building on a hot summer's midnight to be greeted by katydids singing in the trees all around me. The beauty of their voices shot right into me. I put down my bags and just listened in amazement. That song plucked me up for one full moment and then dropped me back hard on the pavement, bruised with gratitude. Beauty and sorrow, joy and ugliness coexist. I had known it since I was a little girl, and now at the worst time of my life, that truth grabbed and shook me again. Many people assume that sorrow and beauty are enemies, but they aren't. In fact, you could say they're lovers. They exhibit their own radiance most fully when their partner is on stage. When you make friends with one, you get its wild soulmate as well. And then I go on to say that, sometimes if we are in the midst of a really hard time, grief, fear, outrage, and then something does happen to pull us out of it momentarily, like those katydids, it doesn't negate the other thing. It doesn't mean that the beauty is somehow wrong or immoral or a delusion or anything, any more than it means that the hard times, the suffering is delusional or wrong. And what is, to me, kind of like the essential of getting on in life is being able to hold both the beauty and the challenges, like feathers in 2 hands. And in fact, I have a chapter in the book called Hold the Feathers of Grief and Joy. It's like just holding them as 2 feathers. So as I said, I've known this for a long time. And my awareness of how I came up with this perspective was I grew up mostly in Omaha, Nebraska. And my father was an alcoholic. And when he drank, he got very violent towards my mother. He would smash things in the house and he would hit my mother. And I was the oldest of the child. There were 2 of us, my brother and me. And I took on the responsibility of going and trying to save her and pull him off of her. And as anyone who's ever grown up in an alcoholic family knows, there's a lot of denial. Oh, I'm never going to do that again. We were expected to believe this. And after a while you say, well, it's going to happen again. And everybody else seems to be denying it. But I had this attitude in myself. I will remember it. I know what the reality is. And then I would go out in our backyard, and it wasn't a huge backyard. It was a nice backyard. There were trees. My mother had flower gardens. And it seemed to me that the natural world was always telling the truth. It wasn't always beautiful. You know, I remember seeing a mouse with its head bitten off. It wasn't always sweet. It was, you know, sometimes there would be two birds fighting or whatever, but it always told the truth, and there was room for everything in the natural world. And that made a huge impression on me. And I thought, if everything is possible right here, life, death, blooming, birthing, dying, being eaten by something, if it's all possible, then I guess it's all possible in me too. And I guess I too can feel both the life and the joy and the beauty and the sorrow and the fear and the pain. And it's all there. It all exists at the same time. And I really believe that by opening up to the possibility of those moments like the katydids, we can get through just about anything. I think we've all read stories, and every time there's some kind of a disaster in the world, you know, whether it's September 11th or a fire or a war, you always find stories in the media about people who have done heroic things, people who give up their own selfish needs momentarily in order to help other people. You know, like the people in who helped their colleague who was in a wheelchair get down many, many, many flights of steps when the World Trade Center was attacked. There's many of these kinds of stories. And I think we need them because we need to know that in a crisis, we too can do something unexpected. We can step outside of the realm of the ordinary and do something really quite extraordinary. Not to be heroes, not necessarily. I mean, we can't all be heroes in this, but we can step beyond ourselves. There's a story that I tell in the book about a young man named Corey Miles. He was a high school dropout. He was living in New Orleans in a squat, in a deserted home. And he liked to spend his days on the basketball court with his friend. And he and his buddies were walking around New Orleans when the water started flooding in from Hurricane Katrina when the levees broke. And all of a sudden, this young man, I think he was 18, he gets the idea, we should go to the bus station and find the box of keys, and we'll go around the city and we'll save people. And so that's what they did. You know, they went around the city and they saved people. And he was afraid. What Corey Miles did, he took people to Houston, to the place where there was a shelter. He had a piece of pizza. Somebody gave him a credit card so that he could go back and get gas and do it again. He ended up saving more than 400 people. If he was afraid that he would get in trouble for stealing buses, but of course he ended up being a hero. And then as I was writing about that, I've been very struck by that story for a long time. As I was writing about it, it dawned on me that there's another figure in that story who's important. And that's the person, we don't have any idea who it is, man or woman, young or old, who gave Corey a credit card when he was at the shelter in Houston. That enabled him to go back. That Corey Miles got all the attention, deservedly so, but somebody made it possible for him to do what he did. And it's that kind of like that, seizing the opportunity to do something just a little bit different, just to open up to the possibilities that can make a huge difference. I have a chapter in my book called "Do It Though Nobody Notices," and there are 35 chapters in the book, and they're pretty short, and they all have suggestions for how we can get through hard times. And they're not things like, get a hobby, get outside and take a walk. They're not things like that. They're things like claim your superpower, get dirty, look for where the smiling ends, open up to the possible marvel of others. So they're provocative. That's what it says in the blurb, that they're sassy. I think of them as kind of provocative, and they are all about what they say they're about. And what they all have in common is that they don't solve the problem. They don't make bad times go away. But what they do is they lift us up for a moment. In fact, I have one chapter called Transcend Downward, which means that, spirit and transcending and being removed temporarily from the anxiety and the pain and the worry that can really like bring us down. It's not about transcending upward to the light. It's about transcending downward to earth. Like the katydids, the katydids pulled me down to earth and pulled me out of my absolute 100% attention to the fact that my husband had just died. It didn't make the grief go away, but it gave me that moment of light and lift and love and joy and beauty. And all of these things in the book, all of these 35 chapters, nothing you do has to cost you anything. You don't have to learn anything. You don't have to get a higher degree. You don't have to Google anything. You don't have to organize anything. These are all just simple things that change our perspective and give us life and hope and meaning. The title, Fierce Consciousness, actually comes from a poem. Robinson Jeffers, yes. The poem is called Rock and Hawk. And he's talking about seeing a hawk, a peregrine falcon, perched on a rock on a windy seacoast in California. And he compares the falcon's intensity, and he calls it its bright power. He says the falcon has fierce consciousness. And I love that image. It's like, if we can develop fierce consciousness as we go through stuff and face it honestly, and go through the dark times and cry when we need to cry, and wail when we need to wail, and at the same time be open enough to be able to hear the sound of katydids, or smell the roses, or watch the moon rise over the hill. Those are the moments that can save our lives. The book started out to be about climate change, but then we fell into the pandemic. I probably think 2 or 3 weeks after the delegation to the Holy Land got back. And then Andy, my husband, died. And I realized that what I had been writing about, how to get over hard times when something is happening to the earth, can easily be translated to getting over hard times under all kinds of situations. The previous book, Radical Joy for Hard Times, is about the importance of giving beauty to hurt places. We tend to ignore hurt places and think that maybe they're taboo, they don't matter anymore, they have abandoned us in some way, and so we abandon them. And I thought about how to do this for many, many, many years. I mean, really kind of close to 20 years before I finally figured it out. I had, when I was doing multimedia shows in New York, we did one about an Oneida man named David Paulus, and he had developed a way of recycling steel waste and had received a National Science Foundation grant to do that. And he told me a story when we were interviewing him for the video of driving out to the Kaiser Steel plant in California, and this huge mound of steel waste. And he climbed up it, and his attitude at first, he was feeling pretty cocky because he was the first Native American to get a National Science Foundation grant. His first attitude was that he was going to conquer the steel waste. And then he got back down to his car after getting samples to put in his buckets that he was going to take back to his lab. And he said, that's not the right attitude. And he lit a match. He didn't have any tobacco. He lit a match and he said, Creator, show me how to be in relation to this. And he said, I realized that this steel waste was not an enemy to be conquered. It was an orphan that got separated from the circle of life. And my job was to bring it back to the circle of life. And I was incredibly moved by that. I couldn't get it out of my mind. It was like doing recycling in your mind and your heart and your spirit, as well as doing it scientifically. It was like acknowledging that there's life and preciousness and value in things that are not whole anymore, whether it's a polluted river or a dead tree or land that's been made toxic by some kind of an industry. So I looked for ways to do that for years. I led a vigil in a clear-cut forest in British Columbia. I did a ceremony near Ground Zero after September 11th. I tried other things. And then in 2009, I created this nonprofit, Radical Joy for Hard Times. And it's a global network. It's a small organization. I'm the only staff member, but it's every year in June. This year it's June 17th. We have an event called the Global Earth Exchange. And people all over the world go to places that they consider hurt or wounded, and they share their stories with their friends. A lot of people go alone, and then they just spend time getting to know the place as it is now. Like, we think we know a place that's been damaged, but we get to know it as it is now. And then we make a gift of beauty for it. And the beauty is just made out of materials that the place itself offers, like twigs or flowers or even trash that you later take out. But it's a really beautiful practice. And then people write little stories, that not short stories, but they write about what happened, and they send pictures, and they're on our website. And we're in the process of getting all these stories from 14 years of this up on the website. It's a big process, but there are several hundred of them there now, radicaljoy.org. And one of the books that I wrote was called You've Made the Earth More Beautiful, and it has stories from the first 10 years of this event. So, when Noel and Bob invited me to come in and be here tonight, and I was thinking about Barbara Marx Hubbard's question, what are you going to do that is your gift to helping humanity to shift its consciousness? And for me, it's just that it's that really strong, fervent belief that if we're always open to making and giving beauty, we can get through anything. And it's not only receiving it, like with the katydids, it's giving it. It's always realizing that other people are going through their feelings, and what can I do to be open to somebody else, to give something to somebody else, to ask them a question, to mirror back something they've said, that let them know that I have really heard them, to let them know something I admire about them. Not as a sort of pedantic Pollyanna-ish thing, but just being open all the time, as much as we can, to finding and making beauty. I think it's a lifesaver. And I also really, really believe that as things become more challenging on our planet, in our community, and on the whole earth with climate change, it's going to be more important than ever to be able to bring forth these inner gifts that we have. And in my chapter, Claim Your Superpower, it's about really identifying those gifts we have. What are those special gifts? And maybe I'll just read you a little tiny bit about from the superpower chapter. And then I'm going to conclude. Okay, what is your superpower? Deep down, you know what it is. Take some time to tease it out and identify it. And don't be shy. That's very important. Be clear and proud about it. Where would Wonder Woman be if she simply said, I'm pretty good in an emergency? When you identify your superpower, tweak it and magnify it so it sounds brilliant and heroic. So it sounds like something that was bestowed upon you under extraordinary circumstances. And then this paragraph concludes, we can exercise these superpowers in our regular lives so as to keep them toned like muscles. The idea being that when there's really a crisis, we'll know how to do it. We don't have to, it's not going to be rusty. What is your superpower? Even if you've never revealed it to anyone else, chances are those who know you would nod knowingly if you whispered it in their ear. So I will leave with that, and I'm eager to have a conversation about any kinds of questions you might have.
Wow, thank you. I just I can't stop smiling. We're getting comments both. The corner of my eye, I can see comments that are on Facebook as well as here in the chat about this amazing perspective, this amazing idea and perspective about how to walk through life. So thank you so much for sharing not only the gift that you currently are sharing through the books and through the organization, but also your journey through that. So important, because I truly feel that if someone is able to articulate their gift to the shift, it may be something different today than it was 3 years ago, or when they were raising their kids, and now they're in their golden years, in their elder years, and how to experience that. So I would be glad to everyone is welcome to turn on your videos, and I'm going to go into gallery view here, so I see everybody's smiling faces. One of the things that, but there are a number of people that are in our room tonight that are folks that do just that. They seek out wounded places and do ceremony and take actions, whether that's picking up trash that I've witnessed Kate Roberts doing in Nashville 3 weekends ago, or in ceremony, water blessings, all kinds of things. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I'd love for folks to join in the conversation. My first question is going to be about your recent tour, though, your book tour. And that is, were there examples of reactions to your reading that surprised you, or anything that was really jumped out in your memory of that trip around the country, that were aha moments for you? Maybe they were witnessing aha moments for others.
Well, I guess the biggest surprise for me was how different kinds of groups related to it. I mean, to give you the far extremes, I spoke in Seattle to a group of military veterans.
Wow.
Who really loved it. And then right before I came home near Pittsburgh, I spoke to a group of nuns in a convent. Wow. And they wanted me to come back and do a Zoom with some other convents. So, and then of course, there's spiritual seekers and seminary students and environmentalists and wilderness guides, and the kind of people that are, tend to be the kind of people that we hang out with, and they related to it. So it was wonderful. That was very, very gratifying to me that it's many different kinds of people find it relevant.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying from that perspective. So is Noelle, I see a note here from Gail that says I'm disabled, and I think that means that her video or mute is disabled.
Gail's on, Bob. Do you have it in gallery?
Okay. Yeah, I do. Okay, great. So who else would like to have conversation with Trebbe? Yeah, Gail.
You have to unmute yourself. Looks like she's got a cat in her lap. I'm
there
a
you
poet
go.
and don't know it.
Now you're with us, Gail. Go ahead.
Now you'll let me. Yes, this is Sage.
Hi, Sage.
Of course it's Sage.
I want to tell you that I am very inspired by this beautiful concept of going to a wounded place and bringing beauty to it. And a couple of things came to my mind that actually are two opposite sides of the spectrum for me. One is when I was in Germany, I was traveling and I came upon a Nazi graveyard. It was a huge graveyard. And they were all Nazis. And the anger and the hatred that I felt, I had to do something. And all I could do was just spit on the grave. That's where I was at. That's all I knew how to do. Comparing that, and now obviously I would do something different today, especially after hearing your talk. And it completely shifts my thinking. But it also reminded me of something that happened, something that I did. I don't know how long it was ago, maybe 20 years ago. And that is, I was finding healing in my life from some trauma in my life. And there's this particular bar in our neighborhood where I was sexually abused. And when I was going through this healing time, I came to a point of healing that, again, I had to do something. I had to ceremony it, something like that. And if I talk too much about it, I could really get teary-eyed. But what I did was I took 2 budding roses from my garden and put them in a vase. And I went to the bar. I didn't know where I was going to put it or what I was going to do with it, but I just knew that I wanted to take them there. And the bartender had his back to me, and there was a couple people in the bar and nobody was paying attention. And so I just put it on the windowsill and then I walked out and I left any hatred, anger, whatever there.
Wow.
And that it made me think of that, like that there's such a different feeling when you bring the beauty to the wounded place, and it wasn't just even the wounded place of the bar, but the wounded place within me, that I was able to come full circle and have and bring beauty and forgiveness. And I'm just so inspired by this practice that you started. I want to be a part of that. And all kinds of things are flooding my mind, like where would I go, what would I do? And it's just beautiful. And I want to thank you. That is huge.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us that story. It's really inspiring. I mean, that you could make such a difference in your own life by bringing a couple of roses and just slipping them on a windowsill and then going out again. It's like such a small action to make such a huge difference. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Gail. Bless you. Who else would like to share? Noel, were there any comments? Olivia,
Olivia
go
would
ahead.
like to share, Bob.
You bet. Go ahead, Olivia.
Am I unmuted? I think I am.
You're good. We can hear you. Yep.
This is so powerful because I was so moved by what you shared, Gail. Thank you so much for sharing that, dear heart. Also, I was moved by what you were telling about the Indigenous man and the steel heap. I was very, very moved by that. And I also, my teachers have been Indigenous elders ever since 1978. And the way that my Cherokee teacher teaches her wisdom is called the beauty way. And that's what we learn. So I was so moved, Trebbe, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, by the way it feels to me as though what you have discovered is very, very ancient in terms of what our Indigenous relatives have done through the ages, seeing beauty in the land. And as you were pointing out, Gail, creating ceremony as part of that acknowledgement. So I was just remarking on that. It felt to me how you've been very infused with something that sounds very ancient and very indigenous. If that, and I wonder if that resonates with you at all. I know you had shared about that man in New York, which was very moving to me.
No, nobody ever suggested that before, but I thank you. No, I just, I just have traced it back to my youth, like I mentioned.
Yeah,
Thank
very.
you.
And also, I'm so intrigued by your book tour that you self-published, and that you set up this book tour all by yourself through your network of friends, and I gather it just wove itself like a big basket. How did you start out doing that? Because it sounds like it was a lot of fun.
It was. I started in the fall. I mean, the book came out in February, and I started probably October because I wanted to book dates before everybody got, booked up. And I wrote to about, I don't know, maybe 28, 30 people and that I knew all around the country and said, well, I mean, not all around. I had a general idea of where I wanted to go. I said, would you be willing to host a book event for me? And it could be, it could be 4 people or it could be 70 or whatever.
Nice.
And a bunch of them said yes. And so, and then I gave everybody a little time slot, and then we firmed up the time slot. And then they just did it however they wanted to do it. They chose the place where it would be, and they invited the people, and so I got to see them, and then what was also really significant to me about this was I didn't plan this, but it just kind of happened. But I never listened to audiobooks or the radio or news or podcasts or music or anything. I just drove and watched and watched the land and sky change. And that became like it became like bearing witness in a sacred way. And people kept asking me what I was listening to, and I would say, I'm not listening to anything.
Mhm.
And the very idea began to seem like it would be sacrilege. So, yeah, it was really, I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. It sounds so inspirational.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. And thank you for that thought about letting the miles go by. Yeah, many of us sing along or listen to news or listen to books on our travels, but the idea of, and we've got a number of cross-country road trippers in this gallery tonight. And so it's a whole new way of saying, just let what's showing up outside the window be the prayer as you journey. That's fantastic. Who else would like to jump in the conversation, please? Noelle, you got a question? Go ahead.
Sure.
Ahmed?
So Trebbe, your organization, you said you're the only staff, and so are these just, you can just go to the website and sign up, or is there a membership or Facebook, or how do we become part of your community or contribute to it?
Well, there is it's really through the website. I mean, we have a sort of a moderate presence on Facebook, but it's not very strong. And the website is radicaljoy.org. And for anybody interested in the Global Earth Exchange, which is June 17th, there's a page there about that Global Earth Exchange, and you register. We're asking people to register just so that, because we've been making little flags. There's some of them behind me on the wall there, the little flags with the birds. So the blue one was made last year by Mayan women, and the yellow one was made a couple of years ago by a designer in Santa Fe, and it's our logo. Our logo is a bird. I think of it as a robin, just flying over the earth and bringing beauty to it. And this year we had a woman in London who got together some little kids, 11 years old, and they made the flags together. I'm waiting to receive them from London. So the first 70 people who sign up and say where you're going to do your event, you'll get a flag. So that's why we have people register in advance. A lot of people do it without registering, but if you register, you get a flag, and then you get to be part of the community and get emails every now and then.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I have another question about as you started, you're talking about this. So I wrote down sorrow and beauty are lovers, and the two feathers of grief and joy. And I'm sure that you have experiences and feedback from people that have written the book, read the book, or any of your books, and have been in the depths of really, really difficult psychological, mental condition, abuse or depression. And for them to be able to see, as you did when you walked out of the hospice center, people to be able to see the beauty in nature, that, as you said, the truth that nature tells, can be such a tremendous leap, such a tremendous movement. Is there any, can you share any examples of people who have been in those circumstances that you can think of off the top of your head, where those kind of things have taken place for people? I mean, there has to be, even unknown to you, there has to have been significant effects of this work and this type of viewing life's journey as a result of your work.
Well, I mean, Gail's story was a great example of how, how an act of beauty can change a wound. And I can think of two examples right offhand. One was, I had a cousin whose name was Ben Johnson, like the poet, and he was a Texas cowboy and a flashy dresser, and he got cancer and he was in the hospital, and everybody talked about how generous he was and how he was always asking the nurses about their day and where they lived and if they had kids, and just making friends with everybody. He was dying, but he was outgoing. And then I heard another story. I mean, I tend to like have antenna that look for these kinds of stories, but it's another Hurricane Katrina story, actually. There was a woman who she and her husband were at home, and the water started rushing under the door of their home, and all they had time to do was grab their dogs and get in their boat, and then they were floating around in this dirty water in their boat for several days. And then the woman said to the reporter, but it was really nice because at night you could lie in the boat and look up at the stars.
Wow.
She found that they didn't even know if they were going to have a home to go back to. I have no idea whether they had, I assume they had water, but she said it was fun that was her words. It was fun to lie in the boat at night and look up at the stars.
Wow. I just remember when 9/11 happened, and there's so many firefighters and others that came to help, and someone said, well, that's what Mr. Rogers says, that when there's something really difficult or traumatic that happens, he says, look for the angels, because they'll come there to heal. And unfortunately, there are so many tragic killings and shootings in our country right now that it's that's the only thing that brings me some solace and some hope, is that there are people who care about the victims and others that are reaching out to them. During this paradigm shift, or whatever you want to call it, that we're going through, that's very traumatic and very heavy on folks. But it's just I just think of Mr. Rogers. That's all I can think of, is like, I gotta believe. I've just gotta say, that they're there. The angels are there. The angels are there and are helping.
Well, another thing about September 11th was all these little, I don't know what you'd even call them, these little altars that went up all over the place, with candles, and pictures of people, and then people would tend them, then people would lay flowers there. And there was something so beautiful and moving. It was like everybody was just joined together in the sorrow. I just read a book by Rebecca Solnit called A Paradise Built in Hell. And she talks about 5 or 6 different catastrophic events that have happened. She restricts it to Mexico and the US so she could speak the language, but it's like the San Francisco earthquake and Katrina and 9/11. And she talks about how people actually came together and would start like little cafes that didn't cost people or anything, or build shelters for one another, or play music together, that people came together in ways that were surprisingly like creative and generous.
Beautiful.
And yeah, creativity flows during that time as well. Like you said about walking up the mountain of scrap metal and or stealing a bus.
Yeah.
Creativity flows. Gail, you wanted to jump back into the circle? The talking stick is yours. Ask to unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. When Noelle was talking so passionately about the shootings and the acts of senseless violence in our country, it reminded me of, and I believe it was Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook shooting. I think there were, and I could be wrong, so please correct me, but if I remember right, it was like there were 21 children that were killed in that school. And what started going around on Facebook were people choosing to do 21 acts of love and kindness, one for each of those children. And it grew huge. Like people all over were doing these 21 acts of kindness to just kind of like balance out the yin and the yang. And that felt so good to I don't think I made it to 21, but I did a lot of them, and it just felt so good each time I did something intentionally to balance out that hatred. And there were lots of people doing it. And yeah, and I remember the word I remember Mr. Rogers using was look for the helpers. And that also struck me, because for me, sometimes it's easier to see a helper than it is an angel, but they're the same thing. And there are always helpers. There's always that balance. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that about the acts of kindness after those children were killed. That's really nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No.
Anyone else like to join in the conversation before we close for the evening?
Well, I just think it was wonderful today. Bob and I, in Kingsport, Tennessee, probably about 12 miles from us, is Eastman Kodak. It used to be Eastman Kodak. It is a huge chemical company, and they make everything from chemicals to adult diapers. I mean, and so we were driving by there, and it looked like it went for miles. And some of the big machinery is like on an island in the river. And, I was just going by there just thinking like, what a beast, all the tubes and 10-story buildings and broken out windows. And, I was just thinking about what's happening to the water. And thank you, Trebbe. Now I could think of it more positively. I could think of, what I can do to add some beauty to that versus just grumbling about it or making judgments about it. I can, in fact, this weekend we will be going to a water blessing ceremony. And, it's just so useful. But what I want to know is, do you ever help people, or do people ever ask you, how do I figure out my superpower? Will you help me figure out my superpower?
Oh, Yeah, it's I had a friend who actually I got this idea from him. It was this young man. He used to ask people and he wouldn't let them get away with doing something modest, like it had to be really cool. And but true, it had to be cool but true. And so and what I have found in asking people about it is that people are quite shy, because we're taught that we're not supposed to be boastful. But and so what I do when I'm working with people, I mean, I don't work with people in any sort of official way, but like if the question comes up, like if I read that part of the book, it's like, people will make a stab at it, and then I'm like goading them to get bigger and wilder and more colorful. And so it's still the same thing, but it's powerful.
So
Yeah.
what is your number one go-to? I know you got 35 in there, but what is your number one go-to you find that I think of Trebbe in nature. Just think of you.
Thank you. Which of the 35 is my?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say favorite, but I'm going to say the kind of like your go-to.
Well, I don't know if I even have I have a section called finding beauty. It's being open to those little shafts of
It'll
beauty.
be very helpful. I think
Yeah,
it's very helpful.
and here's a funny thing. Well, I mean, it's not funny. It's a thing. So after I had that experience of hearing the katydids, and honestly, I mean, it was less than an hour after my husband died. They were at like 360 degrees in these trees. I actually did put the bags down on the sidewalk and I listened for a while. And then I bowed like that. I bowed to the katydids and I picked up the bags. And then, so I had to go back inside because, there was a lot of stuff in there. And I said to the woman at the front desk, "Have you heard those katydids?" And she said, "No." She worked there. She hadn't heard them, So it's like they're always there. That to me is the message of the gifts are there, the beauty is there, the wonder is there. It's just like if we're open to it, it's going to seize us every day in many, many different ways. I've never had a day where I haven't encountered numerous gifts from the world. And sometimes it's nature, sometimes it's human beings. It's just like seeing a stranger do something generous, or it's doing something kind or beautiful. It's everywhere.
Well, I think we have a lot of kind people on this call. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, or just hearing a story about like going into a bar where there's been an act of violence and bringing flowers and having, I mean, that's like that. I'm going to always remember that story.
Yeah.
As you say, it's always going on. Neil Donald Walsh said, "God's always talking, whether you're listening or not, for those that believe in God." And or that form
Creator.
or whatever name it might be, or just to your point, nature. The trees are always there. They're always holding hands with their roots underneath the ground, supporting each other in community. All of those things are always happening. And Tizar's, did the woman never go outside so she hadn't heard him, or whatever. So I'd love to hear some voices. If you don't have any question or comment, just to acknowledge that you're with us on the call this evening. Bridget, do I understand you're from Australia? I thought I saw a note or something about you being on the call tonight. It's wonderful to have you with us. Can you unmute? Say hello. There you go. There you go.
It didn't allow me to do it first. Okay. Yeah, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and I haven't had my camera on because I have been doing an act of beauty all the way while I have been listening very with focus to you, and I'm really grateful. I'm cooking a beautiful meal for a friend who is in a very difficult place at the moment. And she's coming in half an hour, so I could not just be here with my face while I'm mucking around in the kitchen. But I wanted to say my superpower is caring and being a mother. I had a wake up experienced 27 years ago in Arizona. Well, I'm German, but I was in my career as a clinical psychologist and in Pittsburgh actually then, and I traveled a little bit. And in this time, I had this, I call it now looking back, being summoned by the earth, really just this waking up in beauty, or the like you said, Rebecca Solnit, creating paradise in hell. But it was grace. I didn't create it. So it was, and from that moment, I had to leave my career and the letter on the wrong wall, kind of, and that made me, follow my inner guidance and become a mother at 44, living in Australia. And this is my path of beauty, which I have given to my son, who is 21 now, and is an expression of beauty in and out. So he's another gift to the world. He's giving a lot of his music and his creativity to the world. That's my mother.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this inspiration. It's so good.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
We hope you'll find other mornings in Australia to come join us on Thursday evening in the US. Thank you for being with us. Pam,
Thank
did you
you.
have your hand up, Pam?
I did have my hand up, but I'm not sure how good my connection is. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little bit weak audio, but we can hear you.
I just wanted to say that, or just share a little bit, like my husband and I have been going through something over the last year that has really kind of been hate targeted at us over some things. And one of the things that I have found that is just so in line with what you've shared with us tonight is the fact that I have delved into my own creative outlet in art, different mediums of art. And I found, like, when you are creating something of beauty, there can only be love behind that. And so there's not hate, as much negative coming at us. That was one of the ways that I've been able to counteract it the last year, and I've just dove into just finding ways to create, because when you create, all you can have is love. I mean, that's how I feel.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you reminded me, like if you were to look at this situation that's been foisted on you right now, there's probably no beauty in that. So I mean, this was an interesting topic of discussion that came up when I was on the book tour. Like, you can't necessarily find beauty in a bad situation. Like, there was no beauty in the fact that my husband had just died. There's no beauty in the fact that, yet another young Black person was killed because he happened to ring the wrong doorbell. But we have to also look for beauty elsewhere. It's like, it'll pop up at some other place to say, well, even though this horror, this sorrow is going on, there is this over here. There remains this over here. And so, you're talking about suddenly, well, maybe not be suddenly, but feeling really invigorated and enlivened by this creativity. And it's not making the other situation necessarily go away, but it's getting you through it. It's a life vest.
The Life Fest. I love that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank
I'll
you.
also say that I have been a recipient of some of Pam's creations, and with glass and, out in my gardens. Beautiful, beautiful. I think of you every time there. Send you love every time I see it, Pam. You're the best.
Thank you. Who else? Sarah, would you like to unmute and at least say hello? There you go.
Sure. There I am. Hi. Hi. This is all just really wonderful. I'm just having floods of, thoughts of different moments in my life that, there's the silver linings, there's the deep breaths and acknowledgement of the gifts that are coming in the darkest of moments. And sometimes the gifts are part of the darkest moments. Like those gifts wouldn't be there if we weren't having the dark moment, right? There's that, that opportunity, and to be able to be present to it, is a journey in itself, right? In terms of how we learn to be present in our lives and have forgiveness, and to have, turn the other cheek, or lend a hand, or whatever that moment is. It's still a choice, right? And we still get to, I still get to add up all the different choices in my life where it could have been different, but the heart really wants to heal.
Mm, yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
well said.
Indeed, it does. Margot, I see your microphone's unmuted.
Yeah.
Yes.
More people from Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Well, now Winneconne, but that's okay.
Okay.
I think that oftentimes when people, all of us, go through fear and anger and negative situations and traumatic situations, that choosing to see differently through finding things to be grateful for brings beauty back in. Because you find, if you're intending on changing your outlook, you just look for things to be grateful for. Like, it can be as simple as, I have warm socks on. I'm grateful for that. I'm not barefoot, and you just start somewhere, and it builds and builds and builds. And I think that's how we're gonna build it and more into the world, to bring
Yeah.
that beauty in.
Yeah,
And
it's really important.
I'm sorry I missed most of this, because it feels like it touches my heart.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Noel promises to edit it immediately tomorrow so you can watch the replay from the time you
Oh,
missed at the front
glad
end.
there is one. Yay.
Yay.
Thank you for being here. Kathy Roberts, please join us.
Or Kate.
Or Kate, I'll hand you the talking feather. Bring us your
Yes,
picture
actually,
and your voice.
I'm kind of in the same predicament. I apologize for not being right in front of the screen, but I'm
That's all right.
shifting again tomorrow. Yeah, just kudos, accolades for living this, writing about it. And I thought what Olivia said was very poignant, that indeed the walking in beauty, the native attempt to get this way, just thank you for taking us down that same street. And you come to realize there's not much I can control except for the 10 feet around me.
Mm.
And I can always make that more beautiful wherever I am. So yeah, I'm just like everybody else, loving. And let's see, I would say my superpower is I'm a very good listener. And my superpower is being a keeper of my own unique beauty and an appreciator of the unique beauty of everyone else.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And she walks her talk.
Indeed, Wonder Woman. Thanks.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Kate.
And Mike, would you like to bring your voice into the conversation? Thank you.
He's
Kate.
got lots of superpowers.
Yes, he does.
Okay, I'm on now. I hear it or see it. Bob and Noel, these programs are just phenomenal. I've learned so much with all your guests that you've had, especially tonight. I appreciate what's been shared. I have a question. I may have missed where I can find your book. Is it online? Is it through thrift books or some other type of a book dealer?
Since it's self-published, it's on Amazon.
Okay, Amazon.
You get it on Amazon. Fierce Consciousness.
Okay,
The Sorrows of Earth and Self.
great. Thank you. I wrote that
you.
down earlier. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. And again, Bob and Noel, thank you all for what you both do at our Justice Committee and on this special program. It's really a privilege for me to be here, and I'm just so thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. It's our joy.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, Noel, have anything else? We'll wrap up for the evening, or any closing thoughts that you've got to share with us, Trebbe?
No, I just,
I do
really
have
appreciate
something.
being here.
I do have something, Trebbe. I have a question.
Okay.
How many pages are there in your book?
I have to look.
Okay, that's fine.
You want me to count end notes or just the text?
Either way.
Well, you tell me what you want me to know.
Okay, when it's over.
When it's over.
At the end of chapter 35, how many pages you got?
184.
184. Okay, 184. So that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Turn it backwards, 31. Would you read us something from page 31?
Sure. That's a really amazing question. Do you always do that?
Not always, no.
Now,
All right. It's called, well, this is an interesting, you might not like this as a way of ending.
Uh-oh.
It's
Make
called
it 13.
It's called Abandon Hope.
Well, that's got to be interesting. Okay.
Abandon Hope. So I'll just read you one little paragraph here that kind of gets to the point of that. Can
Okay.
we act without hope simply because the actions we take are the right ones, the beautiful ones, the desirable ones? Can we say, in effect, I may never again be happy, but meanwhile, I will look out the window and look and look and look until I see something beautiful. I may not recover from this illness, but I will live each day with as much zest as I possibly can. So the whole first part of the book, I mean, there are 5 sections, and the first one is about how we really have to dive into the conditions that are wrong and just face up to them. So that's part of that section. Like, can we take the actions that we know we need to take without having any kind of glimmer of maybe there will be a result that's a result I really want.
Interesting. So it's kind of like, sounds like surrender when you are looking for beauty.
Yeah.
and one could spend a whole hour talking about the word hope.
Definitely.
And, does it mean giving up and letting I'm hoping something else will happen that I'd have nothing to do with it. That I have some leader or a politician or some whatever that's going to, I hope that'll change, or I hope nature will right itself without we humans changing what we need to change. So that's it's a very beautiful way of concluding, I think.
Well, Bob,
inviting us to look beyond hope. Yeah.
very interesting. Look in the chat. Bridget says, abandoning hope, the best ending of this session. I made a beautiful poem about this.
Oh,
Wow.
Wonderful.
That's
Well,
pretty cool.
Bridget, when you get done feeding your guest that's coming over to a beautiful dinner,
You owe us a poem.
you can email to Trebbe and send her your poem.
yeah, I would love to read that poem.
I would too. So
That would be fantastic.
Send it. Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
wonderful.
Well,
Yeah.
everyone, we're going to wrap up for the evening with much joy, much radical consciousness, and maybe some ideas of other things we can be doing to step out into the world, always looking for the beauty right outside the window. Mainly it's outside the window, but not only outside the window. And I thank you all for being a part of this evening. Please come back every Thursday evening. We're here at the same time, letting someone else share with this circle their gift to the shift in humanity. And thank you so much all for being here. Noel, any other closing?
Absolutely. We are going to have our 10th anniversary of the gathering of the Co-Creators Convergence in Costa Rica, October 21 through 28. So next week, even if you're not going to Costa Rica, come to our call and you can learn about what we'll be doing there. And we will be bringing a lot of beauty, discovering a lot of beauty, sharing a lot of beauty. So if you want to know about when we're going, what we'll be doing, what it costs, what you need to do, or just want to learn more about Costa Rica, please come to next week's call. Gonna be fabulous. That's all I'm saying.
And thank you, Trebbe, for sharing your gift with us this
Thank
evening.
you,
Thank
Just
you,
Bob and
Debbie.
Noel. Thank you,
glad you're back
everyone.
home safely, and much love to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Peace prevail on earth.
Good night, all.
Good
Everybody.
night.